And I have a passion for helping fintechs and policymakers navigate the 21st century challenges of technology and regulation. And we're going to focus in this panel a little more on the technology side, weaving some regulatory themes through. And I'm going to ask each of the panelists now in turn to introduce their amazing companies and technologies to you and set that in a transatlantic context. So I'll start this time to my right with Ryan from Ripple.
Hey, bonjour. I'm Ryan Zagone from Ripple. I don't know any other French, so that's all you're going to get. Ripple is a company that is modernizing the cross-border payments. So when we think about data today, we can move that seamlessly, internationally, basically free anywhere in the world. But when we go to move value, like a payment or money, we have a very different experience. The cross-border payment today will take 2 to 4 days, and it goes into a black box where you can't track the status, you don't know the fees, you don't know how much gets delivered until several days later. So Ripple has developed a new solution. It's a blockchain digital asset-based solution that allows financial institutions to make a real-time cross-border payment. So we can take the settlement time from 2 to 4 days down to under 4 seconds, and we're enabling full transparency in that payment.
Sounds exciting. Come on.
Hi everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. So I'm the co-founder of Contrôle technology, a startup specialized in artificial intelligence for macroeconomics and financial predictions by analyzing all types of different data, such as social media, but as well satellite data, logistics data, meteorologic, oceanographic, and plenty of telecom data, for example. So for this purpose, we have built up also one of the largest data scientist team in Paris. It's a multilingual data scientist team. And at first, the applications were more for investment purposes, for short-term equity investments. Then after it was about macroeconomics predictions, about how to predict business cycles. And now it's also how to predict geopolitics as well, real estate investments. And now, in fact, computer technology turns into more economics intelligence agency.
Yeah, thank you. All of these guys have phenomenal use cases on their websites. I encourage you to visit them because it will just blow your mind in terms of the applications of these technologies. So let's hear about Stratumn.
Hi, my name is Richard Caetano. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Stratumn. It's quite an honor and a privilege to be here. Thank you. I'm an American. I have a French company. And so I've been living in France for about 8 years. My wife is a French doctor, so that's why I'm there. And also all the good things in France. But yeah, I'm really happy to be there. I got to see the French ecosystem, startup ecosystem, take off over the last 7 years. And we're really happy to be there. So Stratumn is it's an international group of people. We're experts in cryptography and blockchain and these kinds of subjects. And what we do is we help enterprise companies transform their information technology to address the concerns that we have today. So we're helping them to improve their relationships with their customers, addressing the privacy and confidentiality requirements that are coming out. We help them build more efficient business networks. And so being able to secure processes between them and their business partners, getting that to real time, digitizing and securing these processes. And finally, we help them build better relationships with the regulators. And so we're able to introduce concepts such as real-time compliance and actually build a lot of the rules that they need to follow into these business networks. Right? So this is really powerful technology, and we're really happy to bring this out.
Great. Let's hear from Moses about Orange Silicon Valley.
Hi, I guess I read off the 5, I think, so I think it's bonsoir. So thank you so much, and it's a pleasure to be back in New York, where I spent about 10 years before moving out to the Valley. For those that don't know Orange in the room, it is a global French telco headquartered in Paris. Just to give some context, it employs about 150,000 people, throws off about 41 roughly billion euro on the top line, and in the retail markets is present in about 29 countries, and through our B2B business in more than 200 countries, so large global telco. And so why are we here? talking about fintech, and we can get into that a little bit more later. But we launched mobile money efforts in our Africa business about 10 years ago. We launched Orange Cash, which I hope you would have mentioned for the peer-to-peer comments earlier. And we also, just last November, launched Orange Banque. Our office, just to context set, Orange Silicon Valley, is a legacy R&D unit. We used to generate about 75% of the company's patents at one point in time. And over the past 7 or 8 years, we've evolved into much more of kind of this open innovation platform.
Fantastic. So your bank, ladies and gentlemen, is here. Thank you very much. So we started to touch on blockchain, so I think that's where I'd like to start, and maybe turn first to Ryan and then to Richard. Ryan, the blockchain hype cycle. Help us cut to the chase here. Where are we? What's real? We hear loads and loads of blockchain activity going on out there. Then we also hear a lot of it's really not past proof of concept, but both of you have business models that are using blockchain actively. Tell us about it.
Certainly. So from a high-level context perspective, blockchain has become a hashtag term. It is an overhyped term at the moment. But what we're seeing in blockchain, it's a similar cycle in other innovation breakthroughs. Now, I'll use the Ford Model T as the example. The Ford Model T was the first automobile in the US that was broadly available. There was a lot of hype around it when it first came out. Like, this could solve many use cases and revolutionize commerce. But what we saw, we were limited to that one design. So over time, the automobile entered a long period of specialization, like taking that one design and specializing it per use case. And today we have a wide variety of models. An 18-wheeler to move goods, your minivan to move your family, your sports car to move fast. Each design specialized for the use case. What we're seeing in blockchain right now is the same evolution cycle. We're in this period of specialization where companies are identifying use cases and specializing the technology for that specific use case. Several of the primary use cases right now: cross-border payments, securities trading reconciliation, trade finance. We had digital identity mentioned earlier. All applicable problems for the tech, but problems that are completely different in nature. The pain points, the capabilities you need, the regulations for each of those activities vary greatly. So in our view, it's not going to be one blockchain for everything will sit on top of, but many different solutions specialized for that very particular use case. So you can specialize things like data privacy and a unique way of using it for identity, or scalability, as Ripple specialized in for a payment system for financial institutions. So we're in this period of specialization right now. When a company is in that specialization period, in our view, successful fintech is the convergence of three things. It's financial services, it's engineering, the technology you're using, and it's regulation. So it's the convergence and balance of those three inputs at day one in your product design cycle. So taking all of these these variables and putting it from day one in how you're going to develop a product for a market. So we're seeing many companies in the sector now in that process. Engaging with regulators, engaging with the market, and optimizing the technology to create a solution that's specialized there. Ripple's done that, focused on cross-border payments.
Great. Maybe we can hear a little bit from your perspective, Richard, about the challenges for blockchain. I mean, you touched on securities. Is the speed there yet in terms of how rapidly blockchain can process transactions per second? And tell us a little bit about some of the use cases at Stratumn for blockchain and where you're seeing the great successes and where you see the big opportunities, but also what needs to move to further enable blockchain to realize its potential.
Yeah, I really like the example of the Model T. You know, that clearly shows the evolutionary process that blockchain has to go through. When we talk about scalability and the performance issues that we're talking about, more or less, are the public blockchains. And these public blockchains typically have a more heavy-duty, slower consensus mechanism so that it can handle types of securities and assets that really have to last a long period of time, maybe decades or something like that. But if we build business networks And we're looking at smaller groups of stakeholders or smaller groups of participants in a blockchain. We can actually specialize, as you're saying, specialize and build faster consensus mechanisms and actually achieve better results. That's strictly at the technology level. And then there's also other ways of scaling the blockchain where we build layer 2 protocols on top. And we're seeing this with things like Lightning networks, where we actually route payments outside of the blockchain and then settle the differences later in time. So there's different ways of addressing these concerns. That's what we see today. Certainly there would be other solutions in the future, things like that. What we see at Stratumn is, our focus is more about securing processes, especially inter-business processes. And today when we look at very complex inter-business problems, it usually involves payments, it involves insurance, liability, who's responsible for what, who's the next participant in the step, the customer journey, where's my file, what's the status of this, am I in compliance, so we have there's so many complexities around a business deal today, right? So what we're doing is we're applying the blockchain technology to solving those problems, and we're looking at how to take flowcharts. I'm really simplifying the description of it, taking flowcharts of the business process and mapping that into blockchain, and using that as a means to secure how these companies work together. And then we get other benefits, such as real-time compliance and things like that. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of the activity. We have 2 large French insurance companies on our cap table. So insurance is very hot. There's a lot of processes involved in insurance and claims and those kinds of things. But also, we're finding a lot of traction in the supply chain domain. So logistics, transportation, those kinds of things. Very, very heavy processes. A lot of inter-business subcontractors, things like that. So this is where we're seeing a lot of the movement.
Right. One of the amazing things to me about blockchain is when we talk about fintech, we're typically in the same breath talking about disintermediation, decentralization. But blockchain brings centralization and new forms of intermediation that can get solved some of these process and other challenges. Before I turn to Tan Long to talk about the amazing cocktail of technologies that QuantCube is using, Moses, did you want to come in on blockchain? Are there any ventures you're partnering with in that space you're excited about?
Absolutely. So, our office around Silicon Valley principally does 3 things. We do research on emerging tech and business models. We pursue product innovation through POCs, pilots, and other types of opportunities. And lastly, we do early stage investing. We have been exploring blockchain for probably the past 3 years. And in fact, our blockchain technical lead was probably the first person, arguably within the company, that was very deeply looking at blockchain and identifying not only use cases, but looking at sort of the technology. We have, I would say, at a high level, and there are certain things I wish I could talk about, but it's confidential. But there are probably, let's say, 15 to 20 different projects within the company that are using blockchain at varying degrees of maturity. We also get a lot of client reverse inquiry asking us about what we can do on the blockchain. So things like supply chain, proof of provenance has been a topic that's come up actually a handful of times in the past few months. And in our office, we also lead sort of these what we call minimum viable protocols, where we work with a corporate client to pursue kind of testing various blockchain technologies.
Fantastic. I'm sure we'll end up with audience questions on blockchain as well. But now I want to turn to Tan Long, who QuantCube has this incredible cocktail of technologies. You heard some of this in his introduction. But can you tell us more about the challenges of using the kind of data analysis and extraordinary satellite imagery and all the different things that you bring together? And what's maybe some business use case examples of concretely what you've been able to deliver with by marrying up these different technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'm going to share with you my passion, which I am passionate about economics, macroeconomics, and investments. And so this is what I'm passionate about. And in fact, whenever you have some new data sets, you heard about big data, it means you have some new territories to explore. Therefore, some new applications, especially, for example, for investments. So at first, I am more, Facebook generation at best, but not that much, social media. But we know that you can extract value from social media back to 2012. So we have created the company 5 years ago. And let me give you some first use cases about how to use social media. First, I have mentioned about investment. So in fact, how we can see the sentiment index, in fact, is a proxy of the value of immaterial assets. As you know, companies are driven now by the value of immaterial assets. So yes, it's very innovative, but the question, does it work or not? So in fact, we have been also the first company to create a big data financial index, which includes companies with a very good reputation. It was back to December 2013, and today this index is up plus 58% compared to S&P 500, which is up 42%, for example. This is the first case of application for the financial industry. Not only it's innovative, but it delivers performance. Now, also, what we are very interested in is about macroeconomics, especially about political elections. So we have been involved in how to predict.
And you've been unusually accurate
Yeah,
across different elections, different jurisdictions. And
I'm going to give some examples and also how we learn from our fails. First, it is true that we have been well known last year, not only about how to predict the Brexit 1 month in advance, as well the Trump election 1 week in advance, and it has been published in the press, as well the French political round, especially the first round, which was very tight. And also we learned from our fails. The first fail that we got, it was back to May 2013 about Pakistan election. This is why we decided to go to multilingual. So meaning we have a specific, Chinese data scientist team, specific Arabic data scientist team, specific Russian data scientist team, as well French, Italian, and English, of course. The second fail that we got, it was back to May 2015, we didn't get the UK election. And I can tell you, even if we put some adjustment factors between the population on social media and the UK population, I was very frustrated. I can tell you, the office knew it when we missed it, basically. And then after we decided to go to more user profile, not to the identity. I give you an example. In fact, if you look at my profile, I like very much, as a subscription, City of Paris, like The Economist, Financial Times, but as well wine tasting. From there, in fact, in what kind of sector I work, what kind of age I am, what kind of political party, what kind of consumer interest. This is how we have also improved our algos also. So this is another example of algos for using social media. And another one, how to use, in fact, a different language. It's about how to predict a crude oil trend. So in fact, we utilize Arabic data because you have 5 times more data in Arabic than in English about crude oil.
fantastic. There's some extraordinary things going on. I want to ask Moses now to talk a little bit about mobile banking. And here we have not a bank using mobile devices, but a mobile operator in origin getting into banking services, which I think is fascinating and amazing. So tell us what new perspective a telecom operator brings to the banking business.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, when you're in the Valley and you say, you're at a telco and it's an exciting place, those are the terms that people usually describe a telco. But about, 5 years ago, our management team started to lay out kind of the strategy for the company. And as I would imagine most folks would probably assume in this audience, and rightfully so, is the telecom industry, there's a lot of competitive pressures. And it's very difficult to grow the top line without making significant capital investments. So the question became, how does a telco find new growth? How does it generate more top line? And how can it do that with using and leveraging existing assets? And arguably more importantly, I think, how do you build a new company, and in this particular instance, a bank, leveraging the brand? So I think The Orange brand is one of the more valuable brands in Europe, and it is, the connotation is that it's a very trustworthy, secure, stable brand. But when we think about mobile banking, one of the key touch points for us is, children these days probably get, I was just talking to my cousin yesterday. She's 9 years old in New York City, and, my niece, and she has, her friends are getting phones. So nowadays kids are getting smartphones at a much younger age. Pierre had a graph where 73% of the French population had access to a smartphone. They're not going into branches as often anymore. So we know that mobile is kind of the center point for people's lives. So in 2016, a company acquired a 65% majority interest in a diversified financial services company called Banque. And through that, Orange Bank was envisioned and was launched in November last year. Kind of high-level goals, 2 million customers over the next 10 years or so. We've already publicly announced having 100,000 customers since launching in November. I think maybe to just kind of connect some dots, that potentially could be of interest. We've partnered with IBM Watson to power some of our AI. We're working with Watson with our Alexa equivalent called Jingo that was announced a couple of weeks ago. And our office is constantly looking at innovations in AI and natural language processing, and we have a very fluid sort of conversation with folks across the company on new innovations that we see in sort of artificial intelligence.
Great, thanks for that perspective on mobile banking. Richard, there was a use case you had on your website that I thought was a fantastic example of opportunity that comes out of regulation. And it's based on the Loi Hamon in France, which mandated the opening up and enabling of insurance switching. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and how it is that blockchain enables that to be done efficiently.
Yeah, this is one of our most publicized use cases, and we got a lot of great feedback, and it was a very successful project. So I'll explain it a bit. So we worked with Deloitte and 14 insurers in the FFA consortium, so the French Federation of Insurers. And in this particular project, there was a regulation, Hammond's Law, which mandated that if a customer wanted to switch insurers, all they would have to do is sign a paper, just like moving a mobile telephone number. This was to help increase the competition between insurers and help the customer experience. So there's a bit of a before and after. So I'll talk about what this looked like before we built the project and what it looks like after. So to comply with this law before, the French insurers, so insurance company A, who needs to send information to insurer B, would actually have to print out documents and then send this through registered mail to the other insurer and then wait for them to respond with printed documents back through registered mail and back and forth until the exchange of information was complete. And this has a lot of pain points, a lot of problems. One is the customer doesn't know where they're at. So you get customers calling saying, is my file, has it been transferred yet? Things like that. And no one can really answer that question, right? It's very difficult. Second, the regulator, of course, doesn't have visibility into where the process is at, which step of the process has been fulfilled. And then finally, you're simply just paying, I think the average was €5 per transfer, right? So you're paying registered mail back and forth. And the purpose of the registered mail was a very important feature of this process, which was to timestamp documents, so that when you send documents to your competitor saying, I need to send you this information and I need information back, I need to have some proof that I can prove to the regulator or to the other company that I have sent these documents. So that's the before. And what Stratumn did is we built out we combined blockchain technology with advanced cryptography, and I'd like to answer the question about the GDPR right to forget. So we addressed that in this solution. And so I'll talk about that in a second. And so we built out a blockchain network where we map the law, the regulations for the law into the network. Right? So all of the the configuration, the settings, everything is configured in a network, and all of the stakeholders who participate in that network agree to those terms, which in this case is dictated by the regulations. Then the customer can connect to this network, and they get a very nice web screen, like you would normally see on any well-designed system, and you just put in information, and it gets routed to the correct insurer, and they can connect to their back office and respond. And so you can do the entire exchange under 2 minutes, right? And of course, the cost of this dramatically goes down. It's through the blockchain. There's some services that Stratumn would charge, of course, but this is nothing compared to the registered mail approach. So the after scenario looks really great, right? The customer always knows where their file's at, and we encrypt all of the information between insurers. And to answer the question now, so one of the important features of any blockchain is immutability, right? So whatever information we put in the blockchain, it doesn't change, right? It cannot be deleted, it cannot be changed, and that's what makes it so powerful. And so what we do in this technology, this implementation, is we never put data in the blockchain. We put proofs of data in the blockchain. Okay, so this could be represented as a digital fingerprint, often called a hash. It could be a zero-knowledge proof, which Theory explained. It could be encrypted data, or masked data, or shielded data. There's many different ways of doing this, right? And so what we did is we store proofs in the blockchain, so you have this layer of integrity for all the information, and then the actual customer data is encrypted and stored in other realms that can be deleted. Right? So that's how we address this problem. It's very simple solution. So I just wanted to finish really quickly. So one, the customer's journey is greatly improved. Second, the inter-business network is much more efficient. It's direct, it's peer-to-peer, there's no intermediaries. And third, we give the regulators special goggles, right? So they can have a node in this network and have real-time compliance reporting. But with special goggles, they don't really need to see all of the customer data. They just need to see the metadata and certain kind of zero-knowledge proof data that would tell them that everything's in compliance. Right? So this is really we see this as next generation business networks, and it's deep information technology transformation. Like this has to be rolled out in phases, but we see this opening, enabling many new solutions to the problems that we see today.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, again, the customer centricity and the problem solving, the pragmatism that we're seeing from these companies, and also, as we heard earlier, from the regulators, is just fabulous. I want to open to audience questions, but I'm going to just ask, in all these new technologies and helping customers to be comfortable with them. Are your customers keeping pace with the technologies that you're using? Are you finding any difficulties in either connecting to or getting the acceptance of the technologies by the customers? And if so, what can we do about it? Is some of that regulatory challenges, cyber challenges? Where do those challenges lie? And then I'm going to start taking audience questions, so everybody get ready, please.
From Ripple's perspective, we got traction once we showed how we specialized the technology for the payments use case. So until that point, we had meetings, we had great conversations, but you don't get traction until you've been thoughtful in how you design the product. And at this point now Ripple's live, where we specialize this blockchain solution. We have over 100 financial institutions using it for cross-border payments, both high value for corporates and low value for remittance. So it's now a young but growing network built on this distributed platform. It focused in on that how we specialize. And where we see a lot of interest is from the regulatory side. I think our clients are very active in this space. Regulators, I think, have recognized this innovation cycle is different, and different in many ways. The underlying technology is entirely new. They don't have the legacy knowledge to understand what's going on. The innovation is global in scope, and it's happening much faster than previous cycles. And when we look at this cycle here, or say take ATMs, that took 2 decades after the ATM was launched before there was wide use. And you can see with blockchain itself, almost every bank already has some type of proof of concept, now pilots, some already in production, and it's only 2 or 3 years in. So the regulatory community has learned we need to change our approach to make sure we're following along. And then you've seen, I think, a lot of the trends we've already talked about today. Regulatory sandboxes, fintech hubs, international fintech bridges or fintech agreements. The FCA has proposed this global sandbox for activity that's global in scope. The regulatory community changed structure, or changed posture as well, so that they can keep up. And I think that's been a hugely positive sign in the market.
That's great. Maybe Tan-Long, you can tell us about some of the challenges with satellite, which obviously eye in the sky is something that tends to make the average human being a little nervous. So tell us about the trust issues and how you're communicating and dealing with those.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first example I have given before, it was about social media analytics. Now I'm going to give you some use cases, how to use multiple data sources at the same time for analytics, including satellite data. For example, whenever you take the energy sector for investment purpose, I have mentioned how to use Arabic social media. But also, with the satellite data, you can measure the level of inventory of crude oil in real time. So it's a competitive advantage. Also, if you want to know if you have some new crude oil wells, basically, there is a flaring effect. It's a kind of heat, and you can detect that through infrared data from the satellite in real time. Also, in the energy sector, you can aggregate all the job openings in real time, and it's going to tell you which sector recruits the most on the list, including in the energy sector. And finally, also, you can use a combination of meteorological data and oceanographic data to predict 2 to 3 days in advance hurricanes, and it's going to touch basically potentially offshore platforms. By using those multiple data sources at the same time, you have a very good view of the energy sector. Now we were speaking about telco data. Let me give you an example for investments. You can in fact follow the flow of population with telco data. You mix it with the price of real estate, and whenever there is high price of real estate, this is where to put your stores, where you have lots of flow of population with high price of real estate. Then this is where you can put also your real estate investments, for example.
Phenomenal. I'm sure this has stimulated lots of questions. Who has a question from the audience? Okay, I see near the back. Do we have a microphone for the lady at the back? Oh, great, fantastic. Here we go.
Hello,
And please tell us your name and
my name is Valentina Bencheva. So there has been discussion about the bugs on Ethereum networks and other networks. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Ethereum is, so to kind of give you a high-level explanation before I dive in. If you look at the Bitcoin blockchain, right, which brought the innovation, if you look at it in two parts, the blockchain is what makes the data immutable, and the Bitcoin is like this register of transactions, right? Ethereum is also based on a blockchain, but instead of like a register, like a ledger, it's actually like a computer. It's like a world computer. They call it a world computer, in fact. And this is a computer where you take your program and you pay to have it run on the blockchain. So everyone has verification that your program ran. In computer science, when you write a computer program, the general case is you don't always know how it's going to end. You write the program in a way where you think it's going to end up in either A or B, but in fact, maybe there might be a bug or something that you did not see that could end up in outcome C. And with the Ethereum, you mix in actual money, Ether, with your code. And so there has been these smart contracts written with the expectation that it would have an outcome A or B, but in fact, somebody found outcome C. And outcome C could actually lock, or you could actually take the money and run. And so the nature of the bugs that we see on Ethereum is fundamentally based on this, right? It's fundamentally based on not knowing how the code may execute, where it may end up, and having other people actually finding that other outcome that was not expected, right? And so this has led to a lot of craziness in the Ethereum world, where they fork the blockchain. So this goes against some principles that some people very strongly believe in, that a blockchain should be immutable. But in this case, because there's money locked up, the stakeholders in this network decide to fork. and undo things. And this leads to other problems, right? So with Ethereum, we at Stratumn, we debate this a lot, and we do a lot of research, and we actually advise our clients that the Ethereum public blockchain may not be ready for enterprise applications, right? Just because there's so many unknowns in it so far. So I hope that was a clear explanation.
Thank you. Yes, I actually meant like how would you correlate that to your blockchain? Like, are there any bugs with your system? Or?
Yeah. So there's a saying in computer science that says the only code that has no bugs in it it's the code that you never write. So that's something that we continuously have to pay attention to. And especially if you're working with cryptography that only a few people on this planet even understand the mathematics behind it. The question is can we trust it? Right? It always comes back to this. And so, we work with actually in the back, our chief research officer is here in News. I'll put your hand up. He leads a lot of our research, and we work with a lot of public institutions and universities, and we actually work with the Ethereum people, and so we're always sharing where these problems come up and how to deal with them. In our case, we're working with processes, which is different than payments, different than Ethereum blockchain, those kinds of things. So the nature of our bugs, of course, is going to be very different than this, and so we have other options to deal with exceptions and things like that.
I think that's an excellent point, and I'm looking for other hands and questions. I think a really important point is when you hear about one of these new technologies, I always get a little nervous when somebody is promising that it's unhackable or that sort of thing. And I think what you will hear from most of the really responsible fintechs is very humble admission that we are blazing new trails here. We're doing so carefully, but that does not mean that we're doing so entirely without risk. Gentleman at the front, I think, is next.
I think this is an incredible panel, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm pretty sure the world will be interested in a lot of the comments that you've made today. My question is, I haven't heard a lot about Bitcoin. Can I say for FinTech that Bitcoin is dead as far as utility? Any answer?
I'm not sure that we have Bitcoin experts on the panel. Does anybody want to? Okay.
So I've been involved with Bitcoin since 2011. It's what got me into the technology, to the blockchain. I believe Bitcoin is what brought the innovation. So when I talk about the blockchain in terms of innovation, I will actually mention Bitcoin. Like, this is what brought it. I don't think Bitcoin is dead. I think it's developing at its own pace. It doesn't need. It's withstood many, many different types of attacks both technical, social. There's been a lot of questions about mining power, centralization, all these kinds of things, but yet it just keeps going. I think we're on going on 9 years now, something like that. That's been running, 99.99959 uptime over 9 years. So it's quite incredible. It's quite an incredible innovation. If I were to look forward, right, could we say that Bitcoin could become some kind of standard, like reserve currency of the world? I think that's actually possible. I don't see why not. People talk about the issue of the energy consumption behind Bitcoin, but at the same time, we look at the existing financial system, and we look at all of the energy consumption there, and all of the national interest behind these currencies, and so there's a lot more behind a reserve currency than we think. What I'd like to talk about when I talk about Bitcoin is the actual innovation, which was, if you look at an ATM machine, right? You talk about the ATM machine, it's a very simple user interface, but behind that ATM machine, there's an extraordinary amount of technology and networks and regulations and auditing and clerks and people and air conditions and offices. There's so much infrastructure to make that ATM machine work. And here comes Bitcoin with a few thousand lines of code on a distributed network, essentially solving the same fundamental problem. Right? So I think Bitcoin deserves a lot more respect than it's getting. It's really where the innovation came from.
Brian, did you want to add something on that?
Like this panel exciting? I think Bitcoin is the Ford Model T, in my analogy earlier. it was the first breakthrough that gave us a lot of attention, hope, and hype about how that technology could be used, but it hasn't shown the ability to scale or mature to be used in an enterprise way. So when you look at things like scalability, get 2 to 8 transactions a second, that's not going to solve enterprise use cases, or even a growing number of retail use cases. The mining is still shown to be very inefficient and costly from an environmental and energy perspective. So I think it was indeed a breakthrough, but you have to take the technology and evolve it. Very similar to Ethereum, and Ethereum I think now has very clear examples of how that's evolved. You can look at Quorum, the JP Morgan platform that is based off Ethereum and specialized for their use cases. I think securities or trade finance is where they're focusing on some of those platforms. But it's this cycle of specialization that has to occur. So I give Bitcoin a lot of credit in that it was that breakthrough, but I think for greater use, particularly in an enterprise setting, I think it lacks the governance right now to be able to evolve that platform forward. Now, that doesn't mean I do want to say, I think some of the retail use cases, the first use case for Bitcoin and digital currency was very retail focused. And I do see that meeting consumer needs. Consumers are using that for remittances in many cases. There's also a lot of speculative investing there. So I do think that is indeed, it's meeting needs. We do need some regulation around that now to make sure that's done safely. But there's this recognition that there's many use cases now emerging, not all retail, some enterprise as well, including for the digital currency.
Thanks for that perspective. I'm going to take one last question from the gentleman here who's been waiting
Thank you,
patiently.
Lisa. As a matter of fact, I would like to follow up on the point you made earlier. My name is Michel Perez and I represent Lab X-Ray Phi, which is an academic research center on monetary regulation, as everybody knows. The question, a little bit English, is about shadow banking. The panel has explained all the progresses which have been made recently and how new systems of payment are going to transform our life. At the same time, those